The world would never guess that the tap, tap, tap of a ping pong ball, a seemingly simple game played by millions of people, young and old alike, would unite two gravely divided nations. In fact, a serendipitous meeting between two opposing forces revealed how a sport could bridge a seemingly impassable chasm. In 1971, ping pong diplomacy forged a friendship between two unsuspecting athletes. This event is considered to be one of the most significant in the realm of international diplomacy, as it reopened and developed the US-China connection. The story of ping pong diplomacy really starts with a man named Ivor Montagu, a British aristocrat who would become a communist agent. He resurrected the little-known sport at the time and single-handedly brought it to life through codifying rules and creating the first International Table Tennis Association. Montagu wrote that his reasons for resurrecting the game were political. I saw table tennis as a sport particularly suited towards the lower paid. I plunged into the game as a crusade to spread communism. Montagu single-handedly gave birth to ping pong diplomacy, initially as a tactic to spread communism, but it would continue to be used today as a way to bridge nations. In 1950, the People's Republic of China was a young entity, and at this time, the Western world viewed Red China as cold and heartless, like communism. The Cold War between the United States and communist countries such as the USSR and China was in full effect. The opposing forces of the Western ideal of democracy and the spread of communism were at the center of a number of conflicts with China, including the Korean War, the Taiwan Strait crisis, and the Tibetan uprising. In response to China's involvement in the Korean War, the US, along with the United Nations, initiated a total trade embargo, which essentially stopped the exchange of goods between the two countries. The US-China relationship was tense, to say the least. China decided to position themselves as a friendly nation in the eyes of the Western world, and ping pong would be the tool to achieve this goal. Table tennis would be the perfect communist propaganda instrument and give a human, compassionate face to Beijing, despite the world feeling that China was a hard and cruel country. From an international perspective, the Cold War was still in full force, and the divide between the United States and communist countries was as deep and divisive as ever. In 1971, this serendipitous event started when American ping pong player Glenn Cowan boarded the Chinese ping pong team's bus while Cowan was late for the 31st World Table Tennis Championship in Japan. Everyone on the bus was shocked by the audacity of the self-proclaimed hippie American. During this time, America and China were very much at odds. China had sided with the Soviet Union during this time due to their shared communist beliefs. An American boarding their bus came as a shock to the Chinese players. Everybody on the bus treated Cowan with suspicion, wondering what he was doing sitting in an enemy bus. Then, in a surprising, unplanned act of kindness, Chinese ping pong player Zhuang Zedong greeted the American, shook hands with him, and presented him with a gift of a silkscreen picture of China's Huanshan Mountains. They communicated with each other via a translator on the bus. This was the start of a genuine friendship. Cowan was surprised by the outreach, but very gracious. He is quoted to have said, "I felt bad that I didn't have anything to give him in return." The next day, Cowan presented Zedong with a t-shirt that had a peace symbol on it and the Beatles lyrics, "Let It Be." These two players bonded over a sport in what would become the quintessential example of ping pong diplomacy. This encounter eventually led to Chairman Mao inviting the US table tennis team to go on a tour of China. On April 10, 1971, the team, along with a number of journalists, became the first American delegation to set foot in Beijing since 1949. When the meeting occurred in Beijing, Cowan stood out as an entertainer and projected a hippie vibe for all of China to see. The Chinese team hosted a ping pong match and deliberately threw the game, which was considered as an act of hospitality, but also superiority. There were more matches played throughout the tournament, and before the team left, the premier from China sent a message to President Nixon requesting that the Chinese team would like an invitation to the United States. After all of the fanfare and footage was displayed in America, the Chinese premier stated that one single event can bring about strategic, diplomatic development. The US department called it a conscious, if limiting, diplomatic initiative by Peking. A Gallup poll in the United States revealed a significant finding. For the first time, a majority of Americans were in favor of including the Chinese in the United Nations. 1 year later, the Chinese team would visit the United States on a goodwill tour as a reciprocal sign of a new diplomatic relationship. Ping-pong diplomacy had opened a channel of diplomatic interactions between two countries. Many of these interactions were conducted by Henry Kissinger, the National Security Advisor. Kissinger secretly traveled to Beijing twice in 1972 on diplomatic missions. This was the beginning of bridging the deep schism that had formed between the two countries. In 1972, President Richard Nixon shocked the country by announcing his visit to the People's Republic of China.
Expressed desire to visit the People's Republic of China, Premier Zhou Enlai, on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, has extended an invitation to President Nixon to visit China.
It was an important strategy and a diplomatic act that symbolized the coming together of two longtime adversaries. It was a big moment for the United States and China. Nixon's week-long trip to China, self-dubbed the week that changed the world, was a major step in the progression of the Cold War and signified an end to the animosity between the two countries. The effect of Nixon's mission included a wedge driven in between the Soviet Union and China, which led to a shift in the balance of the Cold War. The United States and Communist China were also brought closer together by opening trade with one another. The visit also opened China to the rest of the world and sparked some of its future relationships with capitalist countries such as Germany. The media coverage over this trip was immense, with many news channels covering the event that showed the world that the two countries were allies. Nixon's trip has been known as one of the most influential diplomatic trips in history, and it was sparked by two men who had found common ground over ping pong. Ping-pong diplomacy had helped end the 21-year embargo on trade between China and the United States. Chinese goods were allowed back into the United States, and the United States was able to trade with Chinese companies again. This came as a pleasant surprise to business owners in both countries looking to sell to international clients. The effects of ping-pong diplomacy are still being seen today, including the tradition of almost every successive US president since Nixon visiting China. However, ping-pong diplomacy did not just end with the mending of the Chinese-American relationship. Another case of ping-pong diplomacy was between North and South Korea during their own conflict. The team presented a unified team with players from both North and South Korea at the World Table Tennis Championships in Tokyo. This event took place in 1991 and was a step in a tentative peace between North and South Korea. Ping-pong diplomacy was a major step in bringing two very different countries together in a very unexpected way. Tales of this amazing act reach even into pop culture today. In the iconic film Forrest Gump, Forrest gets injured fighting in Vietnam and while recovering takes a liking to the sport of ping pong. In the movies, he continues on to play against the Chinese team in the Goodwill Tour. Ping-pong diplomacy has been recognized as one of the major turning points in thawing the tension of the Cold War. This event was so relevant that in 2021, the 50th anniversary of ping-pong diplomacy was commemorated. As we watch the politics unfold on the global stage, we will surely have to keep our eye on the little white ball.